And welcome back, Bears fans, to another edition of the Bears Brothers podcast. We are now a couple days removed from that disappointing loss in Indianapolis, and it's time to put it behind us and look forward. On Sunday, the Bears are going to be going up against their third AFC South opponent in 6 weeks, and we're also going to share our in-depth scouting report on the Jacksonville Jaguars. I am your host, Will DeWitt, and tonight I'm accompanied by my two fellow Bears brothers, Brandon Hazlett and Nicholas Moriano. Guys, how are you doing?
Doing well. I've got poison oak again, so I'm a little itchy again. But other than that, I'm good.
I'm doing pretty well right now. I was going through, I was sick earlier in the week, but feeling a lot better now.
I mean, just talking Bears football makes you feel better. And speaking of that, guys, this is the game that we're going to be going to this season. So despite that Bears 1-4 record, are you guys excited or is it just me? I'm ready to go. I wish it was Sunday today.
Oh, I'm ready to go. I've never been to in Soldier Field before, so I'm excited to go. I'm ready to see it for the first time.
You know, I'm excited to meet you two in person. You know, we've been doing these podcasts for a long time now, and I've never met you guys. So I've already been to Soldier Field, but I'm most, I can't wait to meet you two guys in person. That's going to be awesome.
Oh, that's so nice. We can't wait to meet you too, Nick. Brandon and I have a nice history, but we're excited to meet you for the first time in person. So yes, we are going to be on the game on Sunday. And if the weather cooperates, we are going to have our live post-game show from Dub Us after the game. And if you're going to be at the game, let us know because we would love to meet you. And let's just kind of get into our show here, guys. And don't forget, at the very end of the show, Nick is going to hand out his reasons why the Bears can come out with another victory. So make sure to stick around for that, especially if you're in the need of a little optimism, which is definitely understandable at this point of the season. So, guys, let's just dive right in. Who are the Jacksonville Jaguars? And we have to start with my quick snapshot. They are 1-3 on the year, last in the AFC South, with their only win coming in Week 4 against the Colts. On offense, they are 26th in yards with 320 a game, 19th in points per game with 21. And on defense, they come in ranked 7th best in terms of yards allowed per game with a 304.5 on average, but they give up the 7th most points per game with 27.8, which is a very interesting combo. So, guys, as always, let's start with the Jaguars offense, which is very pass heavy. They pass 65% of the time. And let's talk about that man under center, Blake Bortles. He comes in completing 61% of his passes. He has 7 touchdowns, 6 interceptions. He's been sacked 12 times and has a passer rating of 79.4 on the year. Obviously, we've seen better football out of Bortles before. So, Brandon, looking at some of his tape, can you tell us what you've seen? Because looking at his stats, they're pretty average at best, and his best game this season was his prior one, which is against the Colts. So let's take that with a little bit of grain of salt, considering how poor the Colts defense is. He also had an extra time to prepare for this Bears defense. So go ahead, explain some Blake Bortles and what his strengths and weaknesses.
No, you're exactly right. He's had plenty of time to prepare, so I imagine they have a pretty solid game plan in place. But his strengths, he's the most accurate quarterback passing on the move. He's very mobile. He likes to use his feet. He scrambled 7 times against the Colts, so he's not afraid to move out of the pocket to create a play. But his weaknesses, he likes to turn the ball over. Like you already said, he's got 6 interceptions on the year. He's got a fumble already this year, and he lost it. And in 2015, he had 14 fumbles. So his weakness is going to be he's turnover prone, so I'm curious to know where his confidence level is at. And I think it kind of showed a little bit early in the Colts game because when you get ready to pass and look downfield, he's pulling the ball back in real quick. So I'd like to know where his confidence level is at, and that would help gauge a little bit more of the weaknesses, but he's a turnover prone, I would say, as of right now with 6 interceptions and a fumble lost.
Yeah, no, highly turnover prone. I actually have a really cool stat regarding his interceptions coming up later on in the show. And Brandon, let's stick with that Colts passing attack, and let's talk about some of Bortles' targets here. Led by Allen Robinson. He comes in the game with 21 catches, 238 yards, and averages about 11.3 yards per catch. He's found the end zone 3 times this season, which is most on a team. However, he only has 55 yards after the catch, and 16 of his 21 catches have gone for first downs. So this is a receiver who has a big catch radius. He has good speed. He's a good route runner. Surely the Bears are going to have their hands full with him. And earlier this week, Vic Fangio said of him, well, we got to do a good job of mixing the coverage on him, but ultimately you've got to win your one-on-one matchups with him. We can't roll up on him all the time, and he's very acrobatic. A good at plucking the ball out of the air type of receiver. He's obviously got good karma going on with the quarterback too. So Brandon, what have you seen from Robinson's tape, and can you give us a rundown of the other Jags wideouts?
First of all, Allen Robinson plays for the Colts. That was how you started this. So, or he plays
LOL.
for the Jaguars. I mean, anyway,
There you go.
anyway, I just said it. So that makes 2 mistakes already. Anyway, Allen Robinson last year he had 40 receptions for 1,400 yards. This year he's got 21 receptions for 238 yards. He's very much on pace to meet the expectations that I think fans had of him. He's going to have another productive year. He made Antonio Cromartie against the Colts. I think maybe that Allen Robinson is the reason that Cromartie got cut. He made him look like pretty dumb. He had a wide open touchdown in the end zone, a great swim move. So he was wide open, an easy target, and they like to look at him when they're in scoring situations. He had another chance to catch a touchdown pass, but he dropped it, hit him right in the gut. He should have caught it, but he dropped it. He's 6'3", so keep that in mind when we talk about in the red zone later. The second wide receiver that I like to talk about is Allen Hurns, also 6'3". He's got 15 receptions for 226 yards. His longest reception of the year is 42 yards, and it was against the Colts. It went for a touchdown, and he made 6 guys miss on that play. 2 missed tackles, and when he planted his foot to go the other direction, there were 4 Colts defenders going swing right the other way. So that's something to watch out for. It's his ability to break tackles, even though he's not as looked at as much as Allen Hurns is. At least against the Colts he wasn't. He had 2 receptions, one of them being that 42-yard touchdown. And the third guy I want to talk about, they use quite a bit of different receivers. You'll see different guys in there throughout the game. But the third guy I want to touch on is Marquise Lee, who has 16 receptions for 169 yards on the season. A lot of his receptions are just short yards. They used him in the first half and the final 2 minutes, just mostly he's the short route out of bounds, and that's when they were hitting him mostly. So I imagine that's where his reception range is going to be. His longest reception this year is 22 yards. So I imagine that is where he's going to be used most, is in the short yardage games.
Sounds good. Good rundown there, Brandon. Nick, how do you think the Bears match up to these receivers?
I think with this matchup, it all depends who's going to be playing for the Bears this week, because we know Tracy Porter, he didn't practice yesterday, and we know Bryce Callahan also didn't practice. And if those 2 guys are out for the Bears, with these 2 receivers who are capable of making big plays for the Jaguars, it could be a long day for the Bears. But the Jaguars do come to this game ranked 28th in the league in passing and only averaging about 21 points a game. So depending on if Callahan and Porter do play, I think the Bears will be all right. This isn't the Detroit Lions, the offense. This isn't the Colts offense. This is the Jaguars, who only averaged about 21 points a game. And I think if the Bears can, just minimize the gains, kind of, I want to see them jam the receivers more. If they could do that, I think they'll be competitive with these guys. But they have to minimize the big plays, because we know last week the Colts had a bunch of 20-yard gains on the Bears defense. And if they allow this Jaguars offense to do this, they're going to be on the field for a long time, and this defense is going to get tired out. But hopefully Porter and Callahan can play.
Yeah, exactly. The injuries are going to, play a big factor. If they can't go, like you said, Nick, the Bears are going to be for a long game if they're unable to go, because these 2 wideouts will just go up and have a field day. So hopefully the Bears can get healthy here, because it's going to be a big factor. Now let's talk about this Jags offensive line. It's been a unit that's been in constant flux this season. They've been out with like any kind of sort of stability. The Jags have allowed 19 quarterback hits, which is good for like the lowest amount in the league. That said, like we said, they had a bye last week, so that number is technically a little skewed. So, Brandon, what insight do you have on their offensive line? They've given up 3 sacks per game on average.
I would say average is a good word to describe the offensive line. They gave up 3 sacks against the Colts, coming from different spots. So it's not like there's one weak link. They're all kind of giving up sacks here and there. You're looking at Kelvin Beachum as your left tackle, Patrick Omameh. Fun fact, his picture on the Jaguars website is still him in a Bears uniform. So if you want to flash back to good old Patrick Omameh days, there's your getaway to it. So then you're looking at Brandon Linder as your center, A.J. Cann, who gave up a sack to Hassan Ridgeway against the Colts, and your right tackle, Jeremy Purnell. Occasionally they'll bring in an extra lineman to block in passing situations. I think if they know they're struggling at some points, I did notice throughout the Colts game, there was once or twice where they brought in an extra lineman who checked in as eligible, but they just used him to block. So that would be something to watch for, is when or if they bring in the extra lineman to help block.
Nice. Looking at this offensive line, it's not one that really scares me. We've gone up against much more stout offensive lines this season. And just looking at them and how the Bears match up, I'm personally hoping, that Hicks continues to make that presence felt. And I'm also expecting to see more of Willie Young coming off that 3-sack performance. Last week, Young rushed as a linebacker and also with his hand in the dirt. And he got to, Andrew Luck both, with both different approaches. So he's obviously going to kind of be used all over the field. And then the Jacksonville's right tackle, like you said, Jeremy Purnell, he's done a great job all season, and he's only allowed 1 sack on the year. So that's going to be a very tough matchup for Willie. But I do think that Fangio would be wise to move Young around, create some mismatches, confuse the offensive line. That way, Willie can get to Bortles and go fishing, because we all want to see that when we're on the game at Sunday. Nick, looking at that offensive line, how do you think that Bears front seven matches up against them?
Well, looking at it, I don't think they're going to have the number of sacks that they did against the Colts. So, the Colts offensive line was, probably one of the worst in the league right now, but I still see them getting to the sacking Blake Bortles maybe 2 times. But when you think about it, last week, the Bears didn't really get to Luck when they really needed to, when it was those clutch 2nd down and 16, 3rd down and 12, where they needed to make a big play. I don't know if they're going to be able to do that against Bortles this week. I think Bortles might have, a good amount of time to throw against the Bears defense. And with the lack of pass rushers, that's what's going to be the key to this game. With, maybe Leonard Floyd is able to play. I know he practiced yesterday, but there's not a lot of guys that can get after the quarterback. But hopefully, we have played better offensive lines, but I want to see if this D-line can get to Blake Bortles just to make him make some inaccurate passes against this O-line that is, like you guys said, kind of average.
Yeah. And again, it's kind of shocking to actually sit back and realize, we're entering week 6 and we're talking about how the weakness of this Bears defense is their pass rush, because coming into the season, we said, wow, they have so many pass rushers. We don't even know how they're going to be able to field them all. Well, hey, injuries happen. But even the players who've been out there have been, pretty hit or miss this season, not playing up to the standard that we thought they would. So it's just kind of crazy to look back and think about how much this, our outlook on this Bears defense has changed so much. So let's switch over. Let's talk about the Jacksonville rushing attack, which has struggled all season. Even though they rushed for 136 yards in week 4, they still only averaged 75 yards per game on the ground, which I don't need to tell you that's not good. I don't see them having a huge game on the ground against us. So, Brandon, how were they able to run the ball so well against the Colts in week 4?
Well, like you said, that's been a rushing attack that struggled all year, because you said they passed 65% of the time. So when you can't get a consistent running game going, it's just not going to be a good game overall. So you're looking at TJ Yeldon, who had 71 yards against the Colts. He ran 9 times to the right, 5 to the left. He seems to kind of, at least against the Colts, he split time with Chris Ivory. Yeldon had 14 rushes and Chris Ivory had 8, so it's not an even split, but they were keeping a solid rotation going between them. He seems like he's a pace runner, even though there was one time where once he got the handoff, the Colts were right there in the backfield, he started running backwards. So if the Bears can make him do that, then we should be okay. And he's also good in pass protection, and also Chris Ivory struggling this year. He only has 20 rushes for 43 yards. He has 1 reception for 9 yards. They used Chris Ivory in an option play in the red zone, which we'll talk about later. Something to watch for down there. He runs most of his plays up the middle and gets a lot of his opportunities in the 3rd quarter. So if you're looking at Chris Ivory, I wouldn't say he's going to have as much of an impact as TJ Yeldon will.
Sounds good. From what I noticed looking at some of the tape was that compared to their first couple of weeks, the Jacksonville Jaguars, they started to keeping the runs primarily like in between the numbers, very north and south attack, which was different. Like I said, during the first few weeks, they tried to, bounce it to the outside a lot. Wasn't working. So they decided to, switch it up, and it worked really well against the Colts. Again, we know how bad the Colts defense is. We gained over 500 yards on them, but they kept that running game simple, and they constantly ran the ball. They had at least 6 rushes in each quarter in week 4. So obviously they kind of wanted to make it a bigger factor of the offense, and it worked. Nick, do you see the Bears, who are allowing 118 yards on the game per game on the yards per, yeah, you know what I'm saying. But anyway, do you think that the Bears are going to struggle against the Jacksonville rushing attack or not?
Not at all, honestly. They're at the bottom half in rushing yards per game and on the season. And we saw what the Bears can do against teams that are not as good running the ball. They kept the Lions under 70 yards rushing and the Colts under 100. And, the Bears are not going to have to put 8 in the box to, stop this run. And they just, like you said, they've passed 65% of the time. I don't see the Jaguars rushing attack being a big factor in this game. And I think the Bears will be just fine. They've already showed in the past that they can hold teams who are not good at running the ball under, 70 and 100 yards per game. So I think the Bears will do just fine against the Jags rushing attack.
Yeah, and especially if they are going to try to keep, the runs in between the numbers again, I'm fine with that. I'm fine with them coming after, Jarrell Freeman, coming after Danny Trevathan. Do that all you want. If you don't, obviously if they try to bounce it to the outside, I'd be kind of, worried because our D ends and our outside linebackers have a really hard time of keeping their contain on the edge. So if they want to run it between the numbers, fine by me. Another thing we should probably note is if the weather isn't going to be all that great on Sunday, I can see both teams kind of sticking to the ground game a little bit more to limit those, errant throws, especially with Bortles throwing all those interceptions. All right, so let's talk about some down situations, guys. And after 3 weeks in a row of playing a top 10 team on third down conversions, the Bears finally get a break. And it's a big one because the Jags are dead last in the NFL, only converting on 15 of their 53 third downs, which is 28.3% of the time. And that might just be the Achilles heel of this Jacksonville team, as they're unable to convert almost 75% of the time, about 3/4, which means that Bears offense will be giving plenty of chances with the football. Nick, the Bears only allow opponents to convert about 38% of the time on third down. So if all goes according to plan, they should be able to shut down the Jags. What will be some of the keys in doing so?
Obviously it starts with pressure, but that doesn't mean that you have to sack Blake Bortles on third down. Just get him to feel uncomfortable because we have a stat that he throws an interception on 66% on third down. So as long as you get him off his mark, he's going to, maybe make that mistake. So the big thing is, just pressuring Bortles, get him in those third and long situations. Don't allow them to beat you with the big play, but that's going to be the big thing. It's nice that the Bears aren't going against a team that's, in the top half of, converting third downs and is facing a team that's actually in, the lower portion of that. So this is going to be the strength of this Bears defense. So they get them to third down. Hopefully they can get off the field.
Yeah, on third down, since you had to take my stat that I was so proud of. But yes, 66% of Bortles' interceptions do come on third down. On top of that, out of his on third down passing, he's roughly throwing an interception every 1 out of 10 passes on third down. So that's something to watch out for the Bears, and hopefully they can force him into a mistake and get him into those bad situations and get some turnovers. Brandon, I'm assuming that these turnovers and that, errant passing on third down is a big reason why they've been struggling on third. Do you have any other observations from the tape that would explain why they've been struggling so much on third down?
Just as long as, like Nick says, they can get him off his block, off his point, then that's how the turnovers are going to come, whether it be by him fumbling or throwing an interception. You just have to make him uncomfortable back there on third downs.
Exactly. All right. So we did talk about the red zone earlier. You kind of talked about how they use Chris Ivory in a weird option to come in the red zone. What other red zone observations do you have, Brandon?
Well, they're very successful in the red zone because if you just look at who they have as receivers, Julius Thomas, I imagine, is going to come back for this game. He's 6'5". You have two receivers that are 6'3", Allen Hurns and Allen Robinson. You have 2 running backs, Chris Ivory and TJ Yeldon, who are not afraid to run it up the middle, like we've talked about. And you have Blake Bortles, who's a versatile quarterback and willing to run. And like we already talked about, he scored on an option play against the Colts. They have plenty of options down there when it comes to scoring. So the Bears have to be on their toes and make sure that you're doing your job to prevent your guy from scoring, because you don't know who's going to end up with the ball down there in the red zone.
Good stuff there, B. All right, guys, let's switch over and let's talk about this Jacksonville defense. Like I said, they're 7th best in terms of yards allowed. They're only giving up 304 yards per game, but then they are 7th most in points given up per game with 27.8. Their leading tackle is Paul Posluszny with 35 total tackles. They have 12 sacks on the year and only 5 turnovers with 3 interceptions and 2 fumble recoveries. Brandon, this is, again, probably one of those better front sevens, and we've played in, the past couple of weeks here. Taking a look at that unit, some of their key players are, defensive end, Dante Fowler, linebacker, Paul Posluszny, like I just said. You got Telvin Smith, and then you have Yannick Ngakoue. I don't know how to pronounce that name. I apologize, but he leads the team with 3 sacks. What insight do you have on that Jacksonville front seven?
You also forgot Malik Jackson, a key free agent pickup in the offseason for the Jags. He's got 9 total tackles, a sack, and a pass deflection for the year. He takes up a lot of space in the middle. He's a good run stopper, and he's got really good hands when trying to get in there in the backfield. But Dante Fowler is one guy that stood out to me because he's like all over the field, it seems like. Anytime there's a run play opposite of him, he seems to be right there when the tackle's made, whether or not he's making a tackle or not. He only has 12 for the season. But it seems like he's always around the ball. He had a very good stunt move early in the game to bat the pass into, I'm going to try and pronounce his name as Yannick Ngakoue, the rookie out of Maryland, who got that interception.
Yeah, that's better than how I did it.
All right. So I would look at Dante Fowler and Malik Jackson as the 2 strong points of that defensive line. And then you're looking at Roy Miller, who has 6 tackles on the year, who's another good run stopper. And then you're looking at a revolving door position here on the right end with Jared Odrick, Tyson Alualu, and Yannick Ngakoue, who have all had time at that position. And I imagine that Jared Odrick is going to come back and get the start at this position because he had a tricep injury. He didn't play the last 2 games, but he's not on the injury report for this week. So I'm assuming that's who they're going to have start there, as the depth chart says. But that's just a revolving door at that position. So you'll see quite a few guys play in that position.
I left Malik Jackson off because I wanted to bring him up here in this point of the show, because my key matchup, looking at this Bears, offense versus this front 7, my key matchup is going to be Kyle Long versus, Malik Jackson. I think that's going to be a slugfest on the inside. It's going to be just 2 dogs going at it each and every down. And I'm going to make sure for my seat at Soldier Field, I'm going to be keeping an eye on that one, because it's surely going to be a fun one to watch and an important one for the Bears if they want to be able to be successful on offense. Nick, we've already, Brandon's already mentioned a couple of people who to watch up front. I gave you my matchup, but how do you see the Bears matching up against that Jags front 7?
Before I go into that, I actually looked up Yannick Ngakoue's name on a highlight reel because I'm like, how do you pronounce this guy's name? I'm going to have to bring him up sometime in the show, but Ngakoue, you guys. But I think that, I think this Bears offensive line is going to be all right, because when you think about the Jacksonville Jaguars only have 12 sacks on the season. Yes, they've had a bye week, but they got 4. It was either 4 or 5 of them against the Colts. So, and the Bears also got, 5 sacks against the Colts. So is it really saying much? They only have 1 more sack than the Bears right now. So maybe it is they have a few good players, but you have Cody Whitehair, who's climbing up the Pro Football Focus leaderboards each week, getting better each week. You have Kyle Long anchoring, the inside of that offensive line. You have, sitting on the other side, and then Leno Jr. is doing his part. And, Bobby Massey is actually, he's getting a little better as the season goes on. It stinks that, he's doing better from the beginning.
Yes.
At least.
But
he's doing better.
Lesser defenses, but that's a different topic for a different day. Go ahead.
Yeah, exactly. But it sucks that Massey will be on that right side against, Malik Jackson and Dante Fowler. It just so happens that he always has to go against, the opposing teams. But, I think that this offensive line is going to give Hoyer time to throw, and it's going to be able to create rushing lanes for Jordan Howard. I think they'll have a good day.
Yeah, I do too. And, you talked about the sacks and how they might not be, a number that has much, strength. Well, looking at one of the weaknesses of this front 7, they actually have a really hard time getting to the quarterback in the red zone. They actually have 0 sacks on the year when their opponents are in the red zone. So, that's good. They might be dropping a ton, but obviously not a lot of pressure on the quarterback is going to bode well for the Bears. But yeah, I think too, like Nick, like you said, I think the Bears are going to be just fine because they allow 4 yards per carry. So like you said, the Bears just got to keep feeding Howard, because if he keeps busting those big gains, they got to keep giving him the ball. And go back to when we were talking about the Jacksonville Jaguars on offense and how we talked about how much they struggle on 3rd down. They're going to give the Bears the football a lot. So if Chicago runs it a ton, they're going to dominate time of possession and keep that Jacksonville, offense off the field, keep the Bears defense fresh. A lot of good positives coming from that. So hopefully they're listening, and hopefully they can give Jordan Howard more touches because he needs them, and we need to keep riding him as much as we can. Brandon, let's switch it over. Let's talk about this Jags secondary. What do you see in that unit?
Well, they are bringing back Aaron Colvin, who had a 4-game suspension for PED use. There's no tape on him for this year, so I'm just going to give you 2015 stats. He had 73 total tackles, 4 sacks, and a forced fumble. I believe he's going to replace Davin House, who really struggled against the Colts. He had 2 penalties in the first half, a pass interference, and an illegal contact. And then his third penalty of the game was a pass interference in the fourth quarter. He's got 12 tackles on the year. He's obviously not scared to be physical because he's willing to draw 3 penalties in the game. Then opposite of Aaron Colvin, you're going to have the rookie Jalen Ramsey, who has 18 total tackles on the year. However, he did play very little press coverage against the Colts. I think he's worried about getting beat. On the snap, he opens his hips up to the middle of the field right away. I think if you can keep the ball to the outside and beat him that way, I think that might be his weakness, is he's worried about getting beat and he's worried about keeping everything in front of him. So those are my 2 takeaways for Jalen Ramsey. And then you're looking at Tashawn Gibson and Jonathan Cyprin as your 2 safeties. Cyprin will be the guy who comes into the box. He did get beat by Dwayne Allen on a pass. He actually did break up, but didn't look back for the ball, so that's a pass interference. And then Tashawn Gibson, I'm assuming that he is the safety that gave up the 64-yard touchdown pass to Philip Dorsett as he followed the out route, leaving the corner in coverage by himself, and Dorsett was pretty much gone by the time the corner could recover, so that's the 64-yard touchdown. A little miscommunication by Gibson there. And also not totally sure I didn't bring up the linebackers when you asked about the front 7, because we've seen quite a bit of Josh Johnson and Prince Amu Kamara. I learned how to pronounce his name before the show, and I even screwed it up there. But they brought them in on a lot of nickel packages, I think, when they knew the Colts would be in desperate passing situations, because then we didn't see Miles Jack, who started in place for Dan Skuta, who I imagine we will see against the Bears as he's back from injury. So that's something to look out for when you know that the Bears are in a passing situation. Look for Josh Johnson or Prince, because I've seen more of them than I did Miles Jack.
Yeah, and gosh, just going through all these names, I'm happy we don't do a Jacksonville Jaguars show, because we would be struggling for days. But good thing that we know how to pronounce all the Bears players correctly. But yeah, going back to Colvin, you said he had those 4 sacks last year. Just a side note, that was a number that led all defensive backs last year. So definitely keep an eye on him coming after, the Bears quarterback, coming after Hoyer, probably on his blind side as well. So just keep a lookout out for that corner blitz, because they're not going to shy away from it whatsoever. But yeah, overall, the Jags have allowed opponents to 66% completions. They only allow 198.8 yards per game through the air. They've given up 8 touchdowns and 3 interceptions, giving quarterbacks a 92.7 rating coming in. Last week, the Bears racked up a ton of yards, but it just didn't translate to points on the scoreboard. Nick, what do you expect out of Hoyer in this game? Is this the week that he kind of falls back to earth a little bit?
I honestly, we already talked about it, but the Bears offense, I think, is going to have a lot of opportunities this game. So I don't see Hoyer's production going down that much. I still see him getting over 300 yards passing. Maybe only 1 touchdown this game. And I mean, that's due in part because the offensive line has gotten so much better, and Howard is he needs to get 20 plus touches this game. But I think that, Hoyer should have another decent game, hopefully turnover free game. But just because of the opportunities he is going to have this game, I think that's why his numbers will look good. But will it translate to the points on the scoreboard? We'll have to wait and see, because I honestly don't think it is.
Ooh, all right. So let's talk about those Bears receivers. How do you see them matching up in this one? Obviously the big one that everyone's been talking about all week is getting Alshon the damn ball. And Hoyer said earlier in the week, you're not going to get it to everyone. That's just the nature of the game. But he still has to get the ball to Alshon Jeffrey, right?
He has to. I mean, I don't know how you don't. How he doesn't have a touchdown yet it's crazy. We're going into week 6, and Alshon Jeffries has to be the focal point. He's the biggest playmaker on this Bears offense. Yet he has been non-existent the last 3 weeks now. I mean, he had his first 2 games. He had his best receiving yards with Cutler, and then ever since Hoyer came in, he's just been non-existent. But other than Alshon Jeffrey, they obviously need to get him going early and often. But Meredith stepped up last week, had a pretty big game. Eddie Royal needs to come back and make be a factor in this game. Zach Miller, he's been contributing each week now, but I think they definitely need to get Alshon Jeffrey going, because he's going to be the one that they're going to look for in the red zone, and he's their main target, so they have to get him involved.
Exactly.
I do have a theory for that. Am I allowed to share it?
You are allowed to share your theory.
Okay. I think It's kind of far-fetched, so
no. Okay.
don't hate on me too much for this, but maybe this is the Bears' way of making Alshon Jeffrey cheap to sign him to a longer-term deal.
There's some people who are saying like that's like the conspiracy, like that's
okay.
It's
kind of just dawned on me sitting here, but I didn't know if that was actually a thing or not. So.
I've only seen a few people talk about it, but yeah, that's a thing people have been discussing. Like perhaps they're just not looking at him. That way, you lower his price. So at the end of the year, you can get him at a little bit more of a bargain. Kind of seems
kind of not right.
Yeah, I would hate that if that's the reason that they're doing this because.
But it just kind of dawned on me, so I
okay.
I wanted to share it.
Yeah, no, that's strange. I hope that's not the case. I mean, geez, I mean, we only won one game. I mean, just give the guy the damn ball, see what he can do with it.
Exactly.
But Brandon, do you have any other insight in that Jacksonville defense?
Other than just watching out for the nickel packages, because Josh Johnson was flying all over the field watching tape. He had a sack on Andrew Luck, so just things you got to watch out for. That right outside linebacker position has been kind of a revolving door as well, much like the right defensive end. And you have a solid Paul Posluszny in the middle and Telvin Smith on the left side, two very strong linebackers. I imagine the Jaguars have no problem sticking in a nickel package if that right linebacker position is going to continue to be weak.
Yeah, I think this will be the game. Like Nick said, that he believes that Bobby Massey's been playing better, which, give him credit, he has played better. But this will be one of those weeks that we're going to see just how much he's improved because he's actually going to go up against some pretty good pass rushers. So I'm excited to see how much he's improved, but I don't know if excited is the right word because I'm also kind of worried. So apprehensive, I'll say that. So let's talk about penalties because they've been adding up a lot over these past couple weeks. Chicago has been undisciplined, and they went from one of the least penalized teams to one of the most. They have 18 penalties against them that were accepted in the past 2 weeks. And despite not playing last week, the Jacksonville Jaguars enter as the 5th most penalized team in the league, and they do have the most yards accepted against them. So needless to say, guys, I'm expecting a ton of flags thrown in this game. If the Bears, though, if they can limit those errors, the Jags will find a way to shoot themselves in the foot, and perhaps that can be another advantage towards the Bears. But if they continue to play how they have in the past couple of weeks, both teams are going to find themselves in a lot, with a ton of penalties. It's going to slow down that flow of the game, kind of disrupt some momentum. Just keep an eye out for that because I'm expecting to see a ton of yellow laundry on the field come Sunday. All right, guys, I think it's time to do my quick hit on special teams. And looking at the Bears, every week it's kind of like the same old story, so I'll keep it brief. But when I didn't hear any news about the Bears bringing in a kicker for a tryout, obviously you guys both know I was pretty disappointed because Barth has been just awful. But coach has said that they are, quote unquote, encouraged that he will improve his accuracy. Well, kicking 62%, accuracy rate, actually making field goals, he can only improve. So I don't buy too much into that quote. He's missed a field goal in 3 of the last 4 games. And Bears, special teams coach Jeff Rodgers, he said that they didn't bring in a kicker because, quote unquote, his ball flight is really good. Okay, then. I'm just going to move on from there. Obviously, he's not making it. He kept talking about even though he's missing, the ball looks good, and it's just small things. He's still
it would look even better if it went through the uprights.
Wouldn't it? It would look 10 times better. I wouldn't be having this conversation if it went through the uprights. But bottom line, if the Bears offense, obviously the Bears offense, like we said, they have struggled once they cross midfield, and they have, not having that reliable kicker who can put points on the board has really hurt this team. And I don't understand why they're not trying to fix it. At least bring someone in to light a fire under Barth's butt. But apparently that's not even a viable option at this point. But hopefully he can turn it around, and hopefully that we can ooh and ah at his ball flight on Sunday. So, and for the Jaguars, looking at their kicker as well, Jason Myers, he is 7-9, but both of his misses came from 50+, and he is 9 for 9 extra points. So obviously they have a better kicker than us, but I guess we can say that each and every week we play because nobody's worse than Barth. All right, guys, it's time to go around the horn and give our game predictions. And I'm going to go ahead and start because I usually defer. I am going to give the Bears a 27-21 victory over the Jags on Sunday because I'm optimistic and I would love to see it happen. And why not? Let's say this happened in overtime because 2 out of the 3 Bears games I've ever been to in Soldier Field have went to overtime. So look out for that. Hoping so. But Brandon, go ahead. What's your prediction?
I have the Bears winning by a very narrow margin, 24-23. I like to see them win when I'm there for the first time, but they just still struggling to put all the pieces together. So I'm going to give them the win, but not by a whole lot.
How many tries does Barth get for that field goal?
2.
Okay, that's fair. Nick, how about you? You are currently our leader at 2-3 on the year with your game predictions. Who do you got?
Yeah, and I was really indecisive on what's going to happen this game, but I have the Bears winning 21, Jaguars 17. So
I like it. We're all going Bears. We're all positive. Bears fans as well, despite last week's loss. 40% of Bears fans have the Bears winning by 6 or less. So everyone's expecting a close game, which is definitely understandable given this underwhelming matchup ahead. All right, which leads us right into bold predictions. Nick, I want you to go ahead and start. What's your bold prediction for this game?
The Bears are going to score 3 touchdowns. That's how they get that 21. It's not going to be field goals. They're going to get 3 touchdowns. I'm not going to say how, but they're going to get 3 touchdowns. Get that 21.
All right. Brandon, go ahead. What's your bold prediction?
We talked earlier about how hopefully Bryce Callahan and Tracy Porter play. Well, I hope that Bryce Callahan plays too because he's my bold prediction. I think he gets an interception on Blake Bortles in this game. First one of the year.
Nice. I like that a lot. Hopefully so. We need him for more than just that one interception as well. And, for me, bold prediction, it was a tough one this week, trying to think of something different, something that hasn't happened yet this season. So my bold prediction for this game, Alshon Jeffrey is going to get his first touchdown of the season, which A, I can't believe that this constitutes as a bold prediction, and B, I can't believe it's week 6 and I'm saying this. It's insane. We're in week 6. Alshon has not found pay dirt. Holy crap. All right, guys. So before we head out, Nick, let's end the show with a few reasons why the Bears will win on Sunday.
Well, if they run Jordan Howard 20 plus times, and I think that's a good way for the offense to keep on the field and give Hoyer time to throw. But they have to run Howard and run him as much as he possibly can. You have to get Alshon Jeffrey involved early and often. He's your best playmaker on offense, and it's one-on-one. Just throw it up to him. He most likely he's going to come down with the ball. And then my last one, cause turnovers. Blake Bortles has thrown 6 interceptions on the season. Get him confused, get him in those long third down situations, and hey, just get him off his game, get him off his point like we've been talking about. And hopefully the Bears, hopefully Brandon's bold prediction comes, true with Bryce Callahan hopefully getting an interception if he plays. But those are going to be the 3 things. As long as you get Howard going, Alshon Jeffrey going, and, cause Blake Bortles to turn over the ball, I think the Bears will be in good shape to win.
Yeah, and to be fair, if any Bear got an interception, I want to be upset. It doesn't have to be Callahan. Brendan doesn't have to always be right, but it's anyone else can get an interception in this game. Let's just make that clear. All right, guys, great stuff tonight. Remember, we're going to be at the game on Sunday, and if the weather cooperates, we will host our live post-game show from the bus right after the game. And if you're going to the game, let us know on Twitter, send us an email, whatever you want to do, because we'd love to meet you. All right, guys, that's all we have for you tonight. I want to thank you all for watching live or listening to the podcast. So for Brandon and Nick, I'm Will DeWitt. We will talk to you as soon as we can after the game on Sunday from the bus. Not sure how long it's going to take us to get set up. Haven't done this before, so bear with us. Hopefully we can celebrate another Bears win. Until then, you know what to do. Bear down, Chicago.